Well, here we are, and we're going to discuss a few other Whitman poems. We'll be talking about Pioneers, O Pioneers. We'll be talking also about Song of the Open Road, and to sort of conserve on time a little bit, probably just a couple of sections of Song of the Open Road, and then also a little bit of I Sing the Body Electric. And hopefully that'll give you, sort of jog your memories and give you better preparation for orals. Keep in mind that your thesis is yours. My job is to make sure that all of you have sort of revisited the points of interest that we've revisited together as a class, that you understand some of the unfamiliar vocabulary or allusions, should some of them have slipped your mind. And then also that you're able to sort of deepen your understanding of the poem, maybe understand a little bit more about how Whitman's works work together and, kind of link up with his universal themes. So let's talk about Pioneers, O Pioneers. Now, we know when we were together as a class the first couple of days that we read Pioneers, O Pioneers together without making any comment at all. The one thing that you should have noticed when we read Pioneers, O Pioneers together was the rhythm of the poem. I mean, he invites us in. He calls us his tan-faced children, right? And then he talks about pioneers, oh pioneers, and it's kind of explosive. What's interesting is the title itself. It's an apostrophe, oh, pioneers. He's calling to us. It's an invitation. And then also what he's doing is he's alluding to pioneers. What are they? Well, a pioneer is somebody who goes somewhere where other people haven't been before, or they're going into some sort of wild, untamed territory. And in a sense, pretty much everybody on this continent, makes their own path. Pioneers are pioneers. And so that's kind of what he's alluding to, kind of a naive view. I mean, the Native Americans were already here. But, this idea of making a path out of something out of the wilderness is a theme that Whitman was really intrigued with, just like a lot of Westerners were intrigued with in the middle of the 19th century. And this is something to keep in mind. This is a common sensibility for his time. One of the things also that you'll want to keep in mind with Pioneers, O Pioneers, is that it's a poem about youth. He has a great suspicion for people who want to be old and staid and comfortable. He's suspicious of people who claim not to have the energy. This is a poem about moving forward. And as you read the poem out loud, you start to think about how there's this sort of mesmerizing going forward going on. So there's a lot of... So think about how the overall imagery contributes to the poem. Okay? Another thing that's interesting is in the middle of the poem where he talks about I too with my soul and body. Whitman is kind of taking on a different persona. He's not just Whitman, the father figure, inviting us to go on this excursion. He's also saying, I too with my soul and body. And you can talk about what you could talk about or think about who Whitman's self is in this poem. What is the self to Whitman? Is it you? Is it your soul? Is it your body? Is it some combination between those three things? Your thesis is going to determine that, or maybe not. And then the other thing too is that there is a beginning and a middle and an end here. Very, very important thing to keep in mind as we go through this. That he does take us to the end of the journey, and he includes everybody. Both the not yet living, the living, and those that sort of who are gone but still push us forward. Some interesting things to keep in mind. Vocabulary. Uh, let me just kind of go through here. Sierras are mountains. Plateaus are the very, very tops, the very flat tops of mountains. Gullies are kind of trenches in the ground. Apparitions, of course, are visions of spirits or ghosts. Mystic is unexplainable. Embryo is a creature that is not less yet developed. Procession is, if we look at the middle of the poem, the procession is a line or a formal march. Bards are poets, shrouded, wrapped up, kind of in sort of a gauzy thing. A shroud is something that people are buried in. Warbling is sort of a sweet singing. Palling is going pale. Corpulent means fat. And a diet, it means not only what you eat, but also kind of your life plan. Toilsome means difficult. And let's see here. That is about it for Pioneers of Pioneers. Just keep in mind his attitude, the rhythm of the poem, and the figurative language used in the poem, and you should be just fine. Okay. For Song of the Open Road, and again, this is another poem that uses the road as a metaphor. Whitman is traveling, and again, this time the road is an open road, and it's a matter of choice. He's not being led on a forced march. The pioneers already made the road. Now what he's doing is walking on it, leading us on it. And so, think about how the thoughts and feelings of Whitman are revealed through this person, right? And, keep in mind too that he's trying to include people. There's some great lines here that you could form your thesis around. Henceforth, I ask not good fortune. I myself am good fortune. What a wonderful thing to say. Think about all of these things. Querulous means, if you look at the second stanza here, querulous criticisms means cranky criticisms. He's basically talking about what he's going to take and what he's going to leave, what he wants, what he doesn't want, what he needs, what he doesn't need. In this first stanza, he's anticipating a journey, and he's excited, maybe. Your thesis is going to determine what his poem means, but just look carefully at the lines and take a look at what his choices are. In stanza 2, he talks about what is seen and what is not seen, and who is seen and who is not seen. And you might want to think a little bit about the people that are included and not included on this trip, and perhaps why he includes and doesn't include people. Okay? Let's move ahead to stanzas 3 and 4. He addresses the air. He addresses the objects. He addresses the light by you. Again, when we use human qualities for inanimate objects, think about what that is, what that particular literary feature is. And then the other thing he does is he actually talks about the sidewalks of the cities and the road. Everything is you. What's the reason he's using you? Perhaps you can form a thesis around that. The living and the dead, again, are included. And then he talks about the very earth and this idea that the earth is somehow expanding, right? He addresses the road. He addresses it. He says, do not leave me. It's amazing. He thinks, when he says at the end, what does he mean when he says, you shall be more to me than my poem? think about the overall feeling that you get. I'm going to go over some of the words that you might struggle with here. You objects that call from diffusion. Diffusion means literally becoming less, becoming sparse, becoming scattered, becoming spread. Okay, latent. Latent means unseen or hidden, right? Flagged, that just means flag stones. The stones are made of flags. The streets are made of flagstones. Facades are fronts of buildings. Copings and iron guards. Copings are sort of the things that hold fences up. Interminable means unending pavements. Trodden crossings means if it's trodden, it's been walked on a lot. Impassive means without expression. Impassive surfaces. And amicable means friendly. The earth expanding, left hand and right hand. Adhere means stick to me. And so think about, again, if you think about the effect of questioning, think about the use of personification, think about why he fuses song and road together. Okay, and then let's skip ahead to the final stanzas here. He says, Alons, come on, through struggles and war, the goal that was named can't be countermanded. So he's saying, you know what, we have a goal, we can't call it back. Countermanding is calling it back. Then he asks questions, and then he says, from fruition of success. Fruition just means when something is finally revealed, okay? The fruit of success, okay? Something that comes forth, okay? What's interesting is he talks about the limitations of the open road, okay? If you read these last two stanzas, you have to be able to think about, well, how does his depiction of the road change from the beginning of the poem to the middle of the poem to the end of the poem, right? And then stanza 15. And again, I hate to say this, but this is I have a unconscious bias, and your thesis is your own. But if you read this and think about some of the things that we discussed in class, and maybe provide your own interpretation, your own thesis about how you understand the poem after reading this last stanza. It's really a song that comprises some of Whitman's great big themes. It uses the road as a metaphor, and it also uses song as a metaphor. So he does a number of Whitman-like things at once. Okay, good. All right, and that said, so we've got pioneers, oh pioneers. The pioneers are making the road. And in Song of the Open Road, what's happening is now that the road is open, he can invite comrades. He can give his comrade, he can give you or me his hand and say, well, can we stick to each other as long as we live? So that's kind of where we are so far with those Whitman poems. Right now what I'm doing is I am hunting down I Sing the Body Electric. A couple of things that I want to highlight about I Sing the Body Electric right now are the details that Whitman uses to talk about the details of the human body. In I Sing the Body Electric, what he's basically saying is that we all share the same assumptions, right? I'm going to use, I won't cover the whole poem because I'd like you to read it on your own again, but there are a couple of stanzas that I think are worth looking at. One of them is stanza 3, one of them is stanza 4. Stanza 7, a man's body at auction, and stanza 8, a woman's body at auction. And what he's trying to say about humanity and the human body has to do with some of his universal themes, and that is, to what extent are we the same or different? And to what extent does our station in life, or does our race, or does our history matter? Every time Whitman looks at a human being, he doesn't just see the human being. He sees he sees them before birth, at birth, throughout their lives, and to the very end of their lives until they're spirits again, and part of that great cosmic, mystic, transcendental oversoul. And so that's really what he's talking when he's talking about. And I sing the body electric. He's not just singing about bodies. He might be singing about that part of us that's immortal, that part of us that is part of everything else and everybody else, and that's the soul. So in stanza, I want to talk about stanzas 3 and 4 especially. He talks about a man that he knew. I knew a man, a common farmer, the father of 5 sons. And what's curious about this passage is it's kind of different from the others in that he's talking about one single human being that obviously he knows personally. And so, he's talking about this person as someone that he admires. We don't know who this person is necessarily, but we do know that this reveals something about Whitman, and that is that he enjoyed individual human companionship. He understands the importance of family life. In stanza 4, he says, "I've perceived that to be with those I like is enough. To stop in company with the rest at evening is enough. To be surrounded by beautiful, curious, breathing, laughing flesh is enough. To pass among them or touch anyone, or rest my arm ever so lightly round his or her neck for a moment. What is this then? I do not ask for any more delight. I swim in it as in a sea." Nice simile there. There's something in staying close to men and women and looking on them, and in the contact and odor of them that pleases the soul well. All things please the soul, but these please the soul well. If you were to form a thesis, think about the repetition that you see both at the beginning and the end of the lines here, and how does it help Whitman carry the message through? How does it influence how the poem is read or heard? When we talk about a man's body at auction and a woman's body at auction, again, Whitman is talking about you can't know when you see a human being treated as an animal or as an object. You ignore the humanity, you ignore the past and the future of these people. And especially in A Man's Body at Auction, when he talks about the slave being the precursor to leaders of nations, he's kind of strangely prophetic there. So it might do you well to read over A Man's Body at Auction and A Woman's Body at Auction. Overall, I think that just sort of revisiting these poems as a whole, but kind of listening to this, focusing on some of these passages, I think will be very, very useful in helping you prepare for commentary. If you have any other questions, let me know. Again, you will not be asked to choose anything that you have not read in those packets or we haven't covered in class. And what I've done is I've essentially covered the highlights of what we're going to be, of what will probably be on IOCs. I don't know exactly what will be there, but I do know that if you've been tracking, paying attention, and doing our practices, you should be in pretty good shape for IOCs. So I wish you luck, and I've got at least 2 more videos that I'm probably going to be posting on YouTube that will also help you make sense of Walt Whitman. Again, look over your materials, sit with these videos with your packets, put them on your iPhones, and try your best to really, really get back into the spirit of Walt Whitman. I know you will. Thanks.